Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this video, we will discuss about mechanisms of synchronization in the Linux kernel. So let's get started. So this is the content that we will discuss in this video. So we will try to find what is critical region and what is race condition, and we will also discuss about locking mechanism, and we will discuss what is a deadlock and how we can lock the shared resources, and we will also discuss how these locking mechanisms affect the scalability and the stability of the kernel. So today we have multi-processing systems in the modern days. So kernel code can be running on different processor, and they may be sharing some resources in the kernel. So to protect the corruption of the data or the wrong update of the data, we need some kind of locking mechanism so that at a present time only one processor can access that and update that. So so the critical region is the region in the code where multiple threads or multiple processors can access and manipulate the data. So for that region, we need locking. We don't need lock for whole code. So we have to identify those critical regions and lock them accordingly. So the mechanism to ensure unsafe concurrency uh, is prevented with the help of synchronization. So synchronization is a way by which we can prevent the concurrent access of shared data in the kernel. And why this race condition happens? Because multiple threads can require the same data because they are running on different processors. So in that case, it will multiple threads can access the same data at the same time. So we need the locking of shared data. So let's take an example. So if we take an example of an ATM machine or an account of a person, if he want to deduct some money, then if we have sufficient money, then we can deduct that amount and update the total amount. So the total amount will be the shared resource if more than two processes are running at the same time. So for this data, we need to provide the locking mechanism. So we can say that this section is the critical section. So here is the one scenario. So we can assume that two threads are running in the system simultaneously at the same time. So if thread 1 runs first and it gets the value of I, it get it as 7, and then it increment to 8, and then it writes the value in the I correctly. And then thread 2 access the same data and it updates to 9. So this is a totally good condition. But here it can happen that our thread 1 was running and it incremented the value, and the thread 2 also at the same time read 7, but due to the preemption mechanism in the kernel, so our uh, this thread 1 here got preempted and it is not running. Then thread 2 is continuously running, so it updates the value of I to 8. So at present time, when the thread 1 will return in the running state, then it will be having the old value that it has incremented. So it will override the value to 8, and this this thread 2 will run again, and it will again update the value of 8. So in this case, they will get the 8 value because they have read the same value, but this is not correct, because if they are updating value independently, then they should update to 9. The final value of I should be 9. So in this way, we can understand that two threads can simultaneously access the shared data. So to avoid the preemption of a thread when it is updating a shared data, we need atomic operations, and these operations are run completely without any interruption from the kernel. So mostly these operations are implemented in assembly language. So here we have one statement, increment and store. So it directly reads the value of 7 and updates to 8. And then when thread 2 is scheduled, then it will also read the value and it will update the value to 9. So there won't be any wrong updation from thread 1 or thread 2. And this process can be reversed, like thread 2 can run first and then thread 1 runs. In both the cases, they will update the value, the final value of I to 9. So these atomic operations helps to avoid the wrong updation of the shared data, because they are providing kind of locking mechanism, because they are accessing the value and directly updating it without accessing by the other threads running in the system. So let's discuss what is locking. So locking is the mechanism by which we can lock or prevent the access of the shared data by other threads or the code running on the other processors. And why it is important? Because when we are sharing the resource that is having very complex data structures, then we can't debug it, and in the most cases it happens that the data got corrupted. So lock actually prevents the concurrency. That means lock helps to avoid the concurrent access from concurrently running threads on the different processors. So this is the typical view. So it can be a very long program, but there can be a small section which shares the data between different threads or processors. So for that reason only we need log. So before entering to the critical region, we can implement a log, and these logs can be of different type. And then our critical section is run, then we can unlock that log, because other code is not sharing data. So we can run those code in any way. So by locking, we are just shrinking the critical region to a small portion that is important and that is sharing the data. So these are the two atomic operation: test and set, compare and exchange. So these run as a single statement, and no other code can execute when these statements are running. So it helps to ensure no race condition, because they will execute atomically. So there won't be any other code to waiting for to complete this statement, like in the locking system. In the locking system, multiple threads will be waiting to get the lock. When a process is running in the critical section, that will be having the lock. When it finishes, then it provide the lock to the other threads or processors. So let's see the implementation of test and set and compare and exchange. So this is the pseudo code. So in test and set, it takes the value of log. So it save this value to a separate variable, and it updates the log to true, and it returns the previous value. And this happens atomically. Similarly, compare and swap takes two values, old and new, and if old and new is not equal, then it returns false. Or if they are equal, then it updates the pointer to new value and return true. So let's discuss what is concurrency. So there are two kind of concurrencies: pseudo concurrency and true concurrency. So when our threads are running in a single core system, then multiple threads can run on a single processor uh, concurrently, one by one. So in that case, both of the threads can be sharing some data. So uh, one after another will update the shared data between the threads. So that is called as pseudo concurrency. But in the true concurrency occurs in the multiprocessing system, multiprocessor system. So in true concurrency, two or more threads can access the shared data at the same time. But in the pseudo concurrency, they were accessing the shared data one at a time. So what is symmetric multiprocessor system? So here you can see that in modern days we have multi-core or multi-CPU systems. So these CPU or processors are independent, but these processors share the system bus, main memory, IO devices, and the interrupt system. So these these processors can be running different code independently. So that's why uh, the concurrency occurs. So we need proper logging of the code. So as we have already discussed, so when interrupt happens, then we have to preempt, we have to stop the current execution of the processor, and we have to uh, handle the interrupt. And similarly for soft hierarchies and tasklets, also in the kernel there is kernel preemption mechanism. So if some important task comes to the kernel, then it can stop the current execution, and it can run the other program to complete the higher priority task. And you in user space, when kernel is running on the behalf of user space, then it can sleep and the other process can be scheduled. So in this way, it will cause the concurrency in the kernel. And as we have discussed that symmetrical multiprocessing systems will be having different processors and different threads running on the different processors, so they can simultaneously access the shared data. So this is also a case of concurrency. So the most challenging part is that we can't actually decide where the critical sections exist in the large code. So there is a takeaway that always when we start designing our complex code, then we have to keep in mind the proper locking system of the code, so that it is SMP safe, preempt safe, and interrupt safe. So when we try to implement a lock, then we have to take in mind that we don't have to lock everything. We have to just lock the data and the shared data that will be shared between the threads or processors. So let's discuss what happens if we don't have the locks. So it can lead to a deadlock, and deadlock is very serious situation in the system because it stops the uh, uh, the whole execution of the system. So let's take example here. So if we have four-way traffic stop, then and we have four cars on the each way. So if each car is waiting for other cars to start, so each car will be waiting for other cars to start, and they won't go ahead. So this is a case of deadlock. And similarly, when a process is running and it has a data that it wanted, and again it is requesting that resource, so actually it already held that data, so nobody else would get the new data requested in the new request. So it will be called as the self deadlock. And again consider four threads and four logs. So assume that every thread has already one log, and again they are requesting for other logs. So as every thread has one log, they can't provide the same log. So in that case, this will also lead to a deadlock case. So we need to avoid the deadlock case with the help of locking. So here you can see that the thread 1 acquires the lock A, and thread 2 acquires the lock B, and then thread A tries to acquire the lock B, but it is held by thread 2. And at the same time, thread 2 is trying to acquire the lock A, but it is held by thread A. So they both the threads will be waiting for each other to release these locks. So this is the example of a deadlock condition in the system. So here we can see the pictorial view. So if we have n processes and n resources, and they have other resource with each other, and they are also requesting for other resources held by other processes, then they will make a cycle, and they will be waiting for each other to release that resource, and that will lead to a deadlock situation. So we can preempt this deadlock situation with the help of lock ordering. We will discuss about it in the coming slides. And we have to prevent the starvation. That means if we have 4 resources and 4 processes, then we should not request the resources more than the processes, or we should always keep the request of resources less than the available resources. And this is to avoid the self deadlock. If we are having some resource, until we finish, we should not ask for it again. And we have to keep in mind that the locking mechanism should be very simple. And when we are unlocking the critical section, then we can unlock it in the any order, because it doesn't matter. But we should always keep in mind that we should release the locks in order in which we have acquired them. So let's assume that we have to acquire locks in the sequence cat, dog, and fox. So the third one will acquire the lock cat, and dog, and fox. So every threads or process running in the system should acquire those locks in the same sequence. But here we can see that thread 2 tries to acquire the lock fox first, and then okay. So as thread 2 is trying to acquire this fox lock, but it is held by thread 2, so it will lead to a deadlock situation. Or here you can see that thread 2 is requesting dog lock, but it is already held by thread 2. So this is a deadlock situation because we are not following the ordering of the locks. So we have to decide that how much code we have to lock. So it is called as the granularity of the locking mechanism. So if we lock a large portion of the code, that is called as very coarse lock. If we try to lock a very small portion of a code, then we call it as very fine lock. So we have to keep the balance between these two. We have to lock the resources that is not very small in size, and that is not very large in size, so that we can have good scalability. Otherwise, when we have very fine locks, then most of the resources will be used for locking and unlocking of the small resources. But when we have coarse lock, then it will lock the large portion of the code, so other processes won't be able to access at the same time. So this will also lead to the poor performance of the system. So to have the good scalability, we need to provide the locks that is between coarse lock and fine lock. So in this video, we can see that we have discussed about the locking mechanism and the deadlock situation, and how we can preempt those lock situations. And at the end, we have discussed about the granularity of the lock that helps to scale up the system very well. So this is all for this video. I will see you in the next video.